Hello and welcome to MBC Exclusive. Our guest this week is the Minister of Education, Science and Technology, Honorable Bright MSAKA SC. You're with me, Kumbukani Piri. Honorable Minister, congratulations on your appointment as Education Minister.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Now, this is not your first time being appointed Education Minister. How do you find the sector of education currently?
Well, the sector of education is both a challenge, at the same time an opportunity. A challenge because the sector is large and with so many issues to deal with. An opportunity because it is a chance to make a difference, to achieve on the national aspirations, to realize the goal of Malawians, and to fulfill the commitment of our President, Professor Asabita, in ensuring that we have developed a human capital that can be beneficial for the development of this country.
What are your immediate assignments?
The immediate assignment that is extremely well known is the removal of fees for secondary education. That is doable and it shall be done. We'll do it in phases. Phase one is to ensure that all fees to community-day secondary schools and other day secondary schools are removed. And as we are developing the budget for the 2026-2027 budget, is to include funds in there to ensure that from next year, boarding fees will also be abolished. So those that are going to boarding school, nationals, and as well as district boarding secondary school, will go to school without boarding fees.
Now, there have been some reservations on issues to do with the school fees being abolished. There are concerns that already funding is a challenge to most secondary schools. With the removal of the school fees, will this not compromise the quality of education?
Not at all. Actually, the decision has been made by the President and his government that we must invest in education, because the countries that have done well in recent years are the countries that have invested massively in education. When you have citizens that are well educated, you have a human capital that is capable of advancing the country much better than a population that is not educated. As they say, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. Ignorance is extremely, very expensive. Moving forward, if we educate our people sufficiently and the critical mass of our citizens have received good education, by and by you are going to be reducing the number of people that live below the poverty line. By and by you'll be reducing the number of people that depend on government aid, free fertilizer, free that, free that. You are going to be reducing that number of people simply because you have educated your population and given them opportunities to get employment or to employ themselves.
Now, of late we've seen a lot of reports of riots in schools, students destroying property. And if we check, most of this is being done because they're protesting against food rations. They're not happy with the diet in schools and issues such as those. What is your ministry going to do to ensure that you counter the problem of rioting among students and, of course, dealing with the diet issues?
Like I said, beginning April 1, 2026, government will take on the responsibility of providing diet to those that are in boarding school. The challenges of diet and rioting around the diet are not as rampant as you suggest. They exist, but they are not as rampant as you suggest. And these are a factor of many things. the school, for example, repeating a particular meal for a long time, or weevils finding themselves in the bins, and such things that would cause the students to be unhappy. When we take over the responsibility of feeding the schools, the school children, we think that we will provide sufficient funding for the schools to be able to buy enough and of the quality that is required for proper nutrition of school-going students.
There have been also issues to do with how do you, when you're coming up with policies in the Education Ministry, do you consult with teachers? Because there have been concerns that teachers are not widely consulted, and yet they are the ones who spend a lot of time with the children.
Let's start from the point that teachers are a critical component of the education sector. And when you're talking about free education, the principal objective is to ensure that we have a population that is well educated. And there is no teacher that would disagree with the need to educate children. So there was sufficient and wide consultation about this. The point that you might wish to ask probably is the fact that what will happen when you have an increased intake of students into secondary education? What do you do about the situation of pupil-teacher ratio? And let me assure you that very soon we'll be engaging in the recruitment of teachers to ensure that we accommodate the number of teachers. So the number of students that will be coming into secondary school, because the barrier of fees will have been removed. We will also construct enough secondary schools. We will also make sure that we have double intake, in the sense that you can have a school that has got classes in the morning and then classes in the afternoon. If you provide that opportunity, it means that that school will be able to accommodate twice the number of students that it is taking on now. But immediately and simultaneously, you must provide the teaching staff at that school to ensure that they take responsibility for the afternoon class. So teachers want to educate a nation. They would not stand in the way of ensuring that more children are educated. It's a question of us also making sure that we are looking after the teachers, providing them sufficient safeguards as well as facilities for them to deliver the teaching effectively, and I think the kind of teaching that is of, should I say, value.
Since you mentioned it, I was going to go there. How many teachers are you looking at employing in the coming years?
It would depend on the number of students that we foresee to join. But as of now, we are looking in the figure of around 20 to 30,000.
You're watching MBC Exclusive. Our guest this week is Honorable Bright MSAKA SC, Minister of Education, Science and Technology. We'll be back shortly after this break. Welcome back to MBC Exclusive. In the program today, we're engaging the Minister of Education, Science and Technology, Honorable Bright MSAKA SC. Honorable Minister, you did mention that you will be absorbing in more teachers into the system. What is the figure?
As of now, we are ready to employ several thousand of teachers. And we will continue to employ them in order to match their number with the students that will be added on stream the moment we remove the barrier of school fees. As you know, school fees has been a barrier to education. Many students left school because they didn't have fees. Some get selected to go to secondary school, but they can't proceed simply because they have decided they can't afford it. But when we remove the fees, all of these will come to get secondary education. And by and by we'll be appreciating the numbers, because we continue to want to have a good pupil-teacher ratio, and therefore the number of teachers we will employ will eventually be determined by the number of students that we get. However, the pupil-teacher ratio is not a static figure. We need to continue to improve on that so that as resources become available, we reduce the classroom size so that one teacher is only responsible for as few as 45 students.
Returning to the earlier issue that we spoke about on free secondary education, how ready is government in terms of funding for this project?
Government is very ready. As a matter of fact, if you listen to the Minister of Finance during his mid-year budget statement, he made it clear that the budget will absorb the amount of fees that the kids were paying in secondary school. We have decided as a government to take on the responsibility of educating the current and the future generation, because we need to develop a Malawi that has citizens that are well educated, that we can describe as a dependable human capital for the development of this country. The competitiveness of every country depends on the quality of its citizens, and we must invest in those citizens in order to improve on the competitiveness of Malawi. I said earlier on that if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. We have made the evaluation and found that there are so many citizens presently depending on government support, mostly because they lack education. We must invest in the next generation so we reduce the number of citizens depending on government.
Now, Honourable Minister, a lot of education experts have reservations, or have expressed reservations on the issue to do with the curriculum that is being taught in our schools, that it is a departure from the realities of life, that we are not teaching the practical realities of life that these children will meet in the labor market. What do you have to say in terms of reviewing the curriculum?
I see their concern as an expression of desire that we must keep pace with the needs of modernity. And to that extent, I agree. Not that we are lagging behind, but that we must continue to review our curriculum to ensure that what we are teaching is what is needed. Like, you must look at industry. What does industry require? You must look at the modern world. What does the modern world expect of a citizen? And therefore, if, for example, artificial intelligence is something that is commonly and widely used today, we must begin to teach our children artificial intelligence. If, for example, e-learning is the methodology for teaching and learning, we must adopt e-learning as a methodology for teaching and learning. As you know, many students presently cannot afford to be studying on campus, to be going into a classroom and living in a university setting and having meals, etc., at the university. However, they can receive the same lessons through technology on their laptop at home and be receiving lessons, write exams, and pass without having gone to the university throughout the year. They probably would go just for the exams. So we are adopting various methodologies of delivering education, but the curriculum must certainly meet the current expectations. So we watch industry, what is expected. Our universities have told me that they do actually discontinue certain programs when they know and realize that industry is not particularly interested in those programs. So they discontinue them and start new ones.
We're talking about university education. There's still a challenge when it comes to issues of accommodation for students in tertiary schools. Most of them really have to struggle to get a place to stay. What is government going to do to ensure that students in tertiary education have good accommodation?
We will continue to support the universities to ensure that there is sufficient university accommodation around campus. That is a key commitment that we have made, and we will continue to do so. If you saw me in 2 weeks ago, I think I was in Blantyre supporting Newbus, I think, in fundraising for similar kind of requirements. So accommodation will continue to be provided on and around campus. However, this requirement can also be lessened, minimized if people are going through e-learning by them acquiring university education through technology, computers, laptops, and such kind of methodologies of acquiring information.
Now, Honourable Minister, there's also been an outcry to do with children who have developmental disorders that are not receiving the proper attention in schools, and mostly because most teachers do not know how to handle these kind of children. What would your ministry do to ensure that children who have these developmental disorders are incorporated in the system of education?
That certainly is a tough question. We do realize that we have issues of disability that affect some of our children, and we have a program for ensuring that we have teachers that are skilled and trained in assisting most of these children. It also depends on the kind of disability and what can be done in order to improve the child's chances of acquiring education. When I was in university myself, even as early as then, we had a student that was graduating in law that was visually impaired. He couldn't see. So the Ministry of Education has had facilities for ensuring that those that have got disabilities of different kinds are assisted. So different difficulties in terms of learning, hearing, sight, all that we do train our teachers to ensure that they provide education. We send some of our teachers to Montfort College to train in handling children with different kinds of different disabilities. And in most of these teacher training colleges, the teachers graduating from those schools have some basic knowledge of dealing with children with a disability. And from time to time, we do have special schools that are simply dedicated to children with disability. But what is desired is not to have those kind of schools where everybody there is somebody with disability, but to ensure that we integrate them into society so that they learn amongst the rest of the children, so that they develop their skills living together with children that have no disability.
Now, a year from now, Honourable Minister, what areas should Malawians expect you to have delivered on? Which 3 tangible areas should people expect you to have delivered on in terms of education in the country?
First and foremost, we will certainly make sure that there is a free secondary education. Secondly, we will make sure that even boarding secondary schools are free. We will ensure that there is more access to secondary schools. What I would like to explain this point is that our desire is that if you pass standard 8, you must find space in secondary education. So this idea of repeating because you have not been selected is going to be something of the past. People will be selected to national secondary schools. People will be selected to district boarding secondary schools depending upon the grade of their passing. But most of our children will be going to community-day secondary schools. And we will make sure that we have sufficient community-day secondary schools to absorb the increased number of children transiting through Standard 8. Some might want to repeat because they want to go to a boarding secondary school, a national secondary school. That's their choice. But the purpose of an exam is that you must either pass or fail. Now, when you pass, you must transit to the next class. So I think you have given me 3. There will be more that will have delivered because our ministry is multifaceted. It's got so many departments. I want to make improvements in the universities. I want to make improvements at MANEB. I want to make improvements at various teacher training colleges. And moving forward, we also to make sure that by the time you graduate as a teacher, you must have a diploma instead of just a certificate. So all those things are the kind of things we want to do to make sure that we improve on the quality. So because a teacher with a diploma teaching at primary school has got better skills to impart knowledge. Now we are also absorbing what is known as foundational learning, that the people that were normally going to nursery school, when they get to the age of 4 and 5, they will be under the Minister of Education.
Mm-hmm. Now, Honourable Minister, you touched on an important issue to do with MANEB, and there's an issue of scraping off examination fees. Is this doable, or will it have a negative impact on the operations of MANEB itself?
Yeah, no. We know how much MANEB was collecting from the students, and we know how much we will have to compensate them. MANEB, the director of MANEB was with me this week, and she also was meeting the Minister of Finance, and this is all possible. You see, the question is simply, where do you want to put your money? And we have decided to put money into education because we think that education is key for the development of this country.
Now, looking at your own personal journey, your career, when you look back, which teacher stands out to you, and what experience you had with that teacher and how they built your career?
That's a very difficult question. I've had a long journey in education, primary, secondary, tertiary. But I think I remember most my headmaster at Box 2, Brother Dosty, who passed on a few years back, but I think I remember him with fondness. I'll not tell you why.
Mm-hmm. Right now, as we finish the program, what final words would you have, and what are your aspirations for the education sector in this country?
Education is obviously a difficult sector, but the most important thing is that we must educate this nation. We must make education available. Secondary education, no child must walk, in the end, must walk 5 kilometers, beyond 5 kilometers to go to secondary education. We would like these children to go to school and come back home under their parental care. As you notice, many people would demand boarding facilities at community-day secondary schools, because the community-day secondary schools are 20 kilometers, 15 kilometers away from home. A child cannot be walking there and back every day. So the agenda is to make sure that we make schools available in nearby places so that the people can go to school and return home under their parental care and advice. Beyond that, when we are done in 2030, we would like to make sure that Malawi begins to be a Malawi that embraces education. We have taken on the responsibility of educating the next generation away from the parents, because having left it in the hands of the parents all these years, in some cases, the parents have not taken on that responsibility effectively, thinking, I grew up without education, so you can, talking about their children, or thinking that for some reason or the other, that child is not mine, that child. For example, in parts of the country, female-headed households, the children have suffered a lot because there's nobody to pay for their school fees. Now, who takes on that responsibility? We've decided to ensure that we give equal opportunity to those that are less resourced, and those that are well-to-do, an equal opportunity to get an education. And from my experience, some of the best brains have come from the poorest families, and they must give them an opportunity to ensure that they get out of poverty, away from poverty, into opportunity through education.
Honourable Minister, thank you so much for joining us on NBC Exclusive.
Thank you. I'll be happy to meet you again as we implement the agenda of the Minister of Education in the coming months and years.
And that's how we conclude this edition of NBC Exclusive. Our guest this week was Honourable Bright MSAKA SC, Minister of Education, Science and Technology. From me, Kumbuka Nipiri, it's thanks for watching and goodbye.
part of Malawi's development story. In line with our 2063 aspirations, is a community voice that engages duty bearers in meaningful